Hi there, this is Joy, and I have two different websites. I have Joyously Henna Tattoos, and I have Joyously Handmade, both on Facebook. And it's been a while since I did a little video, so I thought it would be fun to do something a little different on this video. I'd like to do a little bit that talks about henna tattoos. And henna tattoos are something I've been playing with for a few years. I started basically doing it for my children and for myself. And now that I've practiced a bit and I've gotten a bit better at it, I do it for friends, family, and sometimes at festivals and markets and things like that. And I thought I'd do a little basic video about it. The first thing you need to know about henna, obviously what it is, it's a plant extract, and the plant extract has a staining property to it, kind of like if you spill tea on a white cloth and it stains. Henna has the same basic thing. They use it to stain skin, which we don't use tea for. It's quite strong. Quite often it's a reddish brown color. You can make your own henna, and when you get doing this more, that's what I would recommend. It's more work to make your own henna. Pros and cons wise, the store-bought stuff, which is what this is, I get this from the Oriental grocery store, or one of the dollar stores will sometimes sell it. This gives a more immediate stain, and obviously it's a lot easier just to go and buy a tube and use it than it is to have to make your own henna, which is a several step process. It's not hard, but it takes some practice to get the knack of it so that it comes out the nice consistency. But this tends to be a little harsher on your skin. It tends to dry my skin out if I use it too often. And it also tends to have a less pleasant smell. If you make your own henna, you tend to put in ingredients to counteract the smell. The smell of henna, the plant, is almost like a lemongrass almost. It's not unpleasant, but it also doesn't have an aromatic kind of quality to it. So when I make my own henna, I tend to add cloves and cinnamon and stuff like that to it to balance out the smell, and I quite enjoy having kind of a spicy smell on my skin after I've done it. Also with these, if you have sensitive skin, obviously there is wording on the packages, but it's Arabic writing. I have no idea what it says. I can't tell what the ingredients are. I've never had one that caused me any kind of skin reaction, but I'm not sure what the ingredients are, so you're kind of taking a chance on that. So in the end, I would recommend learning to make henna, and you can find lots of videos on YouTube, which is where I figured out how to make my own, and it took me a few tries to get it right. When you do start making your own henna, the best advice I can give, because you have many different ways to make it, many different ingredients you can use, but the most important thing I've found is to make sure that you strain every lump out of that mixture before you try to mix it, because once you started putting liquid in it, there's no way to go back, and lumps are the most annoying thing you can ever come across when doing this stuff, because it's got a little tiny point in the cone if you want to make detailed pictures, and if you get a little clump of something in there, it's really difficult to get it out without having to actually cut a bigger hole, and the more times you have to do that, obviously the less detailed or delicate your designs can be. So that said, henna designs. Henna designs they could be anything from a simple flower to a row of things. We call these a strip. If it goes along your hand in a row, we call it a strip. Mostly what makes a nice henna design is repetitive motifs. You pick 2 or 3 things that look nice together and repeat them over and over to make a nice design. What I do, or did when I started, I'm trying to be able to do it freehand now without planning ahead. It doesn't always work out perfectly, but I'm a fly by the seat of your pants person. I've mentioned this before. If you want to make sure that it's going to look nice in the end, if not that it's going to look bad, but if it's going to look balanced on your hand so you don't end up with a whole bunch of stuff in one area and nothing in the rest, what I tend to do is trace my hand with a pencil and draw out my design ahead of time, and then it gives me something to look at while I'm working. And that way it also gives you kind of a, if you get it part way and you don't like it, then you can change it before you get it on your skin. Henna, you can wipe it off within a couple seconds of putting it on if you make a mistake, but if you get halfway and try to wipe it off, there's going to be some staining done already, so you won't be able to completely undo your work. By motifs, I mean repetitive shapes. This one, as you can see, this is called a paisley. Basically, it's a leaf shape with a curl on one side and a softer arc on the other. Paisleys almost always are filled in with repetitive patterns. If you do Zentangle or anything like that, you've seen a lot of this kind of thing before. This is basically got paisleys, the long sprouts that are kind of like a teardrop on a string, flowers, and spirals. And that's basically all that makes up this design. It's a couple little sprouts, but for the most part it's repetitive paisley, sprouts, spirals, flower in between. And it's very straightforward and simple. It doesn't take that long to do. But with henna, the most important thing is basically the flow. You can have different types of henna. Again, some, if you watch some of the videos online, some of the hennas are made to be really stringy, and some of the artists will actually pull out a string of henna, curl it, and then lay it down on the skin before it's actually... Other people like me, I'm not really practiced enough to be able to just lay out strings that smoothly, so I tend to drag the henna along the hand as I go. A lot of people do this. Some people don't even use the comb. Some people use syringes. Some people use little like plunger tubes that like you can get for icing a cake or icing cookies. Other people's actually put the henna in a bowl and use a toothpick and that kind of a thing, and they'll dab it on and brush it one step at a time. Very painstaking, but it has the same basic effect in the end. Doesn't matter how you put it on, as long as it's a way that's comfortable enough for you to be able to control it. The other thing about, I did mention before, about these tubes versus these small, when you make your tubes tend to be smaller. They tend to be more this size than the full length tube of these. I find these a little awkward in my hand because this part flops around a little bit. And I'm always worried that it's going to hit the work I've already done and smudge it. So I also tend to roll things up and put a clip on it as I'm working, just to kind of help control the flow, because if you're squeezing here and it squirts back up that end of the tube, you're not getting as much pressure this way. Anyways, so this is the basic idea of what I'm going to try and do today. I'm going to set this off to the side just so that I can reference it as I go. I'm going to be doing it on my own hand. I always keep, the only other thing I really need to keep around is a napkin, because if you get stuff on the end, you'll tend to drag it along with you. So every so often you need to wipe off the end of the tube. With this particular design, I'm going to start here and I'm going to work my way towards the end of my fingertip. I'm not really putting anything else on either part of the hand, just going straight down. Like I say, it's called a strip, to the end of my hand. And I might actually move this camera a little closer. There we go, so I don't have to reach. So you can adjust your grip many different ways. I've seen people do it like they're holding a pencil. I've seen people do it whichever way is comfortable for your hand. The main thing to ensure is that you're not really using your fingertips to apply the pressure. You're applying the pressure with your thumb, because your thumb has a little more control. Your fingertips you want to use to guide the end like you would if you were drawing with a pencil, and your thumb is where you're going to add the pressure to push out. And you want to push out your henna in a nice smooth strip, so you always want to test it first. As you can see, sometimes you get a little clog in the end. There you go. You want to clear your clog and you want to make sure you can make a nice smooth strip before you get started. And then you want to make sure you've got enough henna in your end to get some work done before you have to move. Usually you have to adjust, feed it back down every so often. So we're going to start right up above the wrist bone. And basically the paisley is, as I said, almost like a leaf. It's going to go like this, and you're going to have a nice definite curl on the end with a nice blob. On the other side, it's going to start in the same area, and just a nice lazy arc that's going to meet up at the top with the curlicue. That's a paisley. Fairly simple to do. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fill in the paisley. In this particular case, the most common one I use tends to be a dot, a couple of lines, and then flower petals. I find it nice and pretty. Okay, then before you go to your next strip, you're going to put another straight line across, and that just kind of differentiates, because if you're doing something on top of the edge of a flower petal, you kind of lose the definition of the flower petal itself. The next part of your fill, usually you pick a corner. Always kind of start from a corner. Do the same thing again. So you did your dot and your line, your second line, and your flower petals. Nothing has to be perfect, and it very seldom is, especially if, like I say, you're like me and you fly by the seat of your pants. The basic idea is that you're filling it in with a nice pattern to give it some interest, so you don't just have a big shape hanging out there in the middle of your hand. So you're repeating this over and over. When you finish one line, you're going to go and find a corner, and you're going to start again. So dot, line, line, flower petals. And then a line to finish that particular design before you go on to the next one. Like I said, repetitive motifs. And in the end, because you've used the same motif over and over again, it gives it a nice kind of balanced design. Everything goes together. When you get to the top, you can continue your design up the top, or you can fill in. I'm just going to fill it in to make it a little easier because that's a very small point. So this is what we've got so far. Very simple, very easy. Now, this part's a little harder because you have to have steady hands. Basically, you're going to start at the bottom of the paisley, and you're going to run parallel to that curve of the paisley, up, adjust your hand if you need to. We're going to go around the corner, not as tight as the curl. When we get to the end, we're going to give a lot of pressure so that we have a very thickened area at the end, kind of like a blob, like I said, like a teardrop. And by doing that, you just hold it in one spot, leave a lot of pressure, and then you kind of run your point back towards the line so that it thins as it heads to the line. So this should be nice and thin, that should be nice and thick. And we're going to do 3 of those in a row. I don't know why I like 3s, but I do. So, we're going to go up. This time again, we're going to go out a little farther. Nice thick one. Thin back towards our line. That gives us our teardrop. Third one, same thing. Parallel as close as you can without touching. Makes it a nice, neat design. Nice big thick part back towards the edge. Alright, so there's our first part of the motif there. Now what we're going to do later on, we'll add curlicues and things that are in the design off to the sides. But for now, we're just going to do our straight run up the middle. And that means that we're going to have our next paisley, and this time it's going to come out of this line here. It's going to be attached to that line. Because this paisley curls on this side, our next paisley is going to curl on this side. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to start about there, and we're going to do our line out. We're going to curl back in and do our nice big dot. On this side, we're going to do our arched line and join up with our curl at the top. Alright, so same thing's going to happen in the center. We're going to follow our design that we've done so far and fill it in exactly the same way we did with the first one. This is why I find henna very relaxing. It's kind of like doing, like I mentioned, a Zentangle. It's basically the same idea as a Zentangle, but it's on your skin. Anything where you're kind of doing repetitive designs to me is very relaxing. If I make a little boo-boo, I can scrape a little bit of off to make sure that I still have my space in the middle of my petal. I've got a couple of seconds to play with before it starts to stain, not a lot, but if you get something that's really wrong, you can usually scrape it off before it sets. I have actually done whole designs on my hand and then looked at it later and said, no, I don't like that, and wiped it all off. And it takes a day or two to come off as opposed to a couple weeks, like if you were going to leave it on for the 8 hours that they suggest, which I never do. I'm not that patient. If I'm 2 or 3 hours with it on my skin, I'm lucky. So mine tend to last more like a week, week and a half. But anyways, in that case, I scraped it all off pretty much right after I put it on, and it lasted me for 3 or 4 days, I guess, before it wore off again. So I didn't have to put up with it for too long. I just got done and I didn't like it. The fun part usually is putting it on anyways. By the time I hit my week and a half, 2 weeks, I want to try something different, so I'm okay that it's coming off. Okay, so we finished our second paisley. We're going to start our next pile of, I call them sprouts. And it's going to go, like I say, not quite as curled as the end, but still on a curved line. Next one, it's not as smooth as I'd like, but my hand is a little bumpy there. So that's my excuse. There we go. Third one. And again, thick on the end, thin towards the line. Just going to pull some more henna down into my tip. So this is my second paisley done and my second sprouts done. Again, I'm going to reverse the curl, so this time the curl will be on this side. I'm aiming to go up my middle finger, so I want to make sure I don't come too far this way. I'm going to start over here. And I'm going to do my line out and my curve back. And then again, start the other side of my paisley, join up with my curve. And again, we're going to fill it with our little flowers. Now, if it weren't for me doing all this yammering in between, this whole design would probably take me about 10 minutes, which is fairly quick. If I'm doing festivals or things where there's large numbers of people, what I tend to do is ahead of time I'll draw a few little things and make a poster so that people have something to choose from rather than letting them just say what they want, because that takes more time for them to decide usually than it takes to do the piece. And if you're doing something like that, you want to have as much time to get as many people in as possible so they're not disappointed if you run out of time at the end of the whatever it is, fair or market or whatever. Usually you're on a time frame, so. And that didn't end all that well in this spot because I have a narrow area, so I'm just doing some little lines, fake it till you make it. So there's my third paisley. And again, as I mentioned before, if I start running low on henna in the end of my tube, I'll add a curl to the end. Oh, maybe it's not quite ready for that yet. There we go. And I put my clip in to help hold it, and that keeps a little more pressure down towards the end of the tube so that I'm not having it fold all over the place on me. I don't like that at all. Alright, so In my design here, bring it back over and show you. We're at this Paisley. I've got 2 more to go if I follow my design exactly. And again, they're from sprouts, so we're going to sprout up. What's going on there? But we'll get rid of that. We're going to sprout over to here. I don't know if you can see, there's actually some leftover henna on my hand from last week's design. It's the one I didn't really like. So this is like day 3, and it's almost gone. So this is why I decided that I would go ahead and do a new one. Maybe I can distract people from the bits that are left of the old one I didn't like. And 3rd sprout. There we go. So the next one has to definitely go up to the base of my finger. I want to make sure I'm heading in the right direction. So I'm going to start here, do a nice curl, and end there. Try not to get too close to the inside of the finger area, because when you put your fingers together, sometimes you can smudge your design on the finger beside it. People tend to, you want to do this when you're doing a design, but people don't tend to sit like that, so if they put their fingers together, you're liable to smudge. So just try not to get too far down in between their fingers. Sometimes you've got a design you have to follow through on the line, and you can't really help it, but if you have the choice, kind of go out and around and save yourself the aggravation of having a big black smudge there later. Something else that you need to know about henna, I suppose. Henna originally, from what I understand, not really an expert, but I've done some research. The reason, obviously, that henna developed in countries, henna grows there, but in countries with desert climates, a lot of that has to do with the fact that henna has cooling properties as well as staining properties. Here I'm going to do exactly what I told you not to do, and I have to go down into that groove to get my sprouts. How ironic is that? Henna has cooling properties, and by cooling properties I mean that for whatever reason the skin that you put henna on will feel cooler than the rest of your body. So somewhere along the way, I don't know if they were using henna to stain other things first, but between the staining properties and the cooling properties, a lot of ancient cultures that lived in desert areas would put henna on the palms of their hands and the soles of their feet, because these are the parts of their body, I guess, that help cool your body off. It's like your body's thermometer. And so when you put the henna on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, it would cool your entire body down and would help them survive in desert climates. And that, of course, would stain their hands and feet red. Somewhere along the line, somebody obviously decided that they didn't want their hands and feet completely red all the time, and they decided to get more artistic with it, and that's where we ended up with these beautiful designs and things that they have today. Today, henna is part of a lot of different cultures, and it's part of a lot of different kinds of celebrations that take place in different cultures. But still, you'll notice the basic reason, and it's very obvious if you put any amount of henna on your body at any time, when you're sitting there letting it set and stain, that part of your body will drop in temperature dramatically. And I guess in our culture, where I am in Canada, it's cold in the wintertime. So doing henna for someone in the wintertime can be rather uncomfortable. they need to know ahead of time that they're going to have an area of their body that's going to feel quite cool. So you can't obviously lay a blanket on top of something that's got wet henna on it, but you can, you know, kind of bundle up the rest of their body to help counteract that. In the summertime, if you're outside at a festival and it's 90 degrees out there and everyone's sweating and complaining, it's quite pleasant. But you do have to kind of think about the fact that it is going to make a difference to how they feel. If you do a very large henna in the middle of someone's back or all down the side of their thigh, they're definitely going to notice a dramatic difference in the temperature of their body. So, and it's fascinating to have that happen and to realize what a difference it might make to someone who is living in a climate that was uncontrollably hot all the time. I can understand how it got to be so popular. Anyways, that was just a sidebar. So we're now at our 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 5 on here. We're on our 4th. I'm going to do my one last, and then we're going to start adding some decorations to our design. So we're going to do our last curlicue again, opposite direction to the one before it. So the curlicue is on the opposite side. And I'm going to do a nice fat paisley for this one since it's the last one. They're getting progressively smaller, you might have noticed, as it goes up the finger, because obviously my finger is much narrower than my hand was. It also just gives kind of a nice symmetry to the design. You'll notice certain parts of the hand will soak up more of the color than others. Knuckles, anything where there's lots of fold in the skin, knuckles and things, will soak up more color than the rest. Also, the palm of your hand will soak up a much darker stain than the back of your hand. It's more, I guess, the skin isn't as thick, maybe is the best way to say it. Outer arms and things like that will always be paler. And even if you're doing, as you are with mine today, a design that is partially on the arm and partially on the hand, you'll see a change in the color when the stain happens, that this section of the hand will be darker than this. It all has to do with how thick the skin is on certain areas. Parts that are obviously out in the sun all the time are thicker than parts that are usually covered. So they don't kind of have a need for protecting itself as much. Things like the back of your knees, I think, actually stain quite well. The top of your knees stain quite well. So if you have a design that runs over that part, you'll notice a definite difference. Another just little sidebar. Okay, so I've got my last little sprouts to do. I'm going to do one little different thing on my sprout this time. Because I'm running out of room, getting narrower, instead of having the sprouts all start at a different spot here, as I did, 1, 2, 3, I'm actually going to pull each sprout out of the same stem, so to speak. Because, again, I'm running out of space on the width of my finger. Okay, so I've got my 1, 2, 3, and then as kind of a finishing flourish, I'm going to do a 4th. And the 4th is going to come out, curve the opposite way, and then to do a little fancy seed sprout on the end of it, like that. So I've made a big thick part here, and I've kind of stretched it out to a point on that end, and that's a nice little flourish. Now to do our little decorations that we had, we're going to put a little flower in a couple of the corners where the paisleys and the sprouts meet. So there's one there. And yep, I've got a nice big one here according to my design that I've got. I might not turn out exactly like my design. And because I have more space, instead of just making a little daisy type flower like I have been, I'm going to go one step further, and I'm going to add some nice big petals to it as well. One thing when you're doing flowers on henna tends to be kind of a universal thing, it seems. Part of it I think has to do with the traditional henna methods, but most videos will show the the outside edge of the petals are always a nice dramatic thick line. The inside section near here, not so much. Quite often, if you're watching videos where they're teaching you, they'll tell you to go over this section again afterwards to make a very distinct edge to the flower petals so that the flowers themselves stand out more than the rest of the plant. Now, there are several ways to shade flower petals. Some people will shade from the outside edge in, some people will shade from the inside edge out, and some people will simply add lines. And today I'm just going to add some lines just to make kind of like the creases that you would get in a flower petal. Gives it a little interest so it's not just one big white space again. So that's my first little flower. I'm going to add another bigger one here. And lines again for creases. If I have more space, I tend to do like kind of a sprout line where it's thick and heads in thinner towards the center. Gives it a nice look. So there's where we're at so far. There are a few more little embellishes to make, and in some cases that's going to be just a case of, well, that's repetitive. In some cases it's going to be simple spirals lumped together in threes. Just gives a nice little kind of a decorative look to the edge. I always tend to put kind of a nice little round blob in the inside of my spiral. So I've got one there. I'm going to put some spirals over here. Just kind of do them in a size that fits in that area. And then over here, I'm going to do a couple sprouts again. And I'm going to do just nice big fat sprouts. Like so. And one that curls the other way. Like I did at the top. And it's going to have a, well, you know what? I don't like that. I think my design is too close to the edge of my hand and it doesn't work out as nice as I had hoped. So, gone. There goes that. There we go. I'll do it that way instead. And my design had originally spirals right here. And then I've got another pile of sprouts. I'm just going to see if I can adjust my hand a bit so it's easier angle for me. When you're doing it on yourself, sometimes you have to kind of wiggle it around to get it in a way that's comfortable. If you're doing it on someone else, it's easier kind of to get them to move their hand or just adjust your body. On yourself, sometimes it's a little harder to do a good angle. And we're going to do another sprout that goes out this way. And I've just got an air bubble, which is a pain. Gonna go out this way. And like we did at the top, we're gonna do another bit of a sprout like that. And then we're gonna do this. And the last one is gonna come to a bit of a point. Now, all that's left to do, according to my original design, I think is, I'm going to do some little sprouts in there. And I've got some curlicues or some spirals. Right there. All right, so take a look at it and we'll decide if that's done. Most of the little corners and nooks and crannies have something of interest. Not sure if I'm happy with the end. But at the moment I can't really think what I'd like to put there. When in doubt, you can always add a few dots and see if that looks any better. Successive lines of dots are quite popular in henna. They tend to get bigger and then smaller as you go. Actually, I kind of like that. All right, I think we'll call that done. So here we go. This is our finished product that we're calling a Paisley Strip. My henna tube came with a pin in the end that helps keep the air out. So we'll pop that back in there if we can. And again, I can't really smell this from here, but this isn't really the most pleasant smelling henna. My handmade stuff tends to smell a lot better. But it does tend to stain quickly. So what we'll do now with our henna, traditional method will say at this point you can take a mixture of sugar and lemon juice and you dab it on, and that will help keep the henna from flaking off while it sits on your skin. In many places they will wrap this in like toilet paper or gauze or something and sleep with it overnight, which I can't stand to do because I keep thinking about all the bits and pieces falling off in my bed. I don't use the sugar and lemon myself because quite often when I'm doing it for people, I'm doing it outside at a market, and all I can think of is how many flies a pile of sugar on your skin is going to attract, and it's going to drive them nuts all day. I tend to put a bit of hairspray on it just because it does tend to flake and fall off, and the longer you keep it on your skin, the darker stain you're going to get. The darker stain you get, the longer it lasts. So I'll just find some aerosol-free gel-based hairspray and I'll spray that on just to keep it stuck on there a bit better. When you're done leaving it on for as long as you want to leave it, I'll take this off before bedtime. So it'll probably be there at 7 o'clock now. It'll probably be there till maybe 10 o'clock. And you cannot put water on to get it off. You want to avoid water for at least 24 hours if possible. Obviously, you're probably going to wash your hands at some point. Just do a kind of a delicate, try not to get a lot on the back of your hand, because the water itself is going to stop the stain from setting. It's still actually setting after you take it off. It's setting for the first 24 hours. And when this comes off, it's going to be an orangey color. Tomorrow morning when I get up, it will have darkened to more of a brown color. So there is some sort of chemical reaction that goes on that takes time, and that's affected by the water. So because it dries like a mud, a very thick, dry mud, easiest way I've found is to scrape it off. Just kind of scrape it off like you would dry mud, or brush it. I usually use, to be honest, a credit card or something like that, because I find it's easier just to kind of scrape it down your skin. Once that's done, if you still have some bits on there that you can't get off very easily, I usually just take some hand cream, because hand cream is good for it. You can put hand cream on every day to help keep your skin from drying out, and if your skin doesn't dry out as fast, again, the henna lasts longer. And also the hand cream will kind of loosen up those last little bits and pieces so that you can wipe them off without having the water issue going on. That's about really all I've got to say on the henna for today. I haven't done a henna video before, so we'll see how this goes. I haven't had a chance to set up my craft room to do my polymer clay videos like I were before. Hopefully soon I will get back to that. I might do another henna tutorial later on, some other kind of design. But for now, have a good day. I hope you actually get the time and take a chance and go out and try and do some henna. You can practice making shapes on wax paper and stuff with the henna first if you want to, just to get your basic shapes and things down. If you've ever iced a cake with a tube of icing, it's a lot like that. So if you feel comfortable icing a cake with a tube of icing, you can probably do your own henna. And it's a lot of fun, and it's something that's inexpensive and non-painful and very pretty. So have a good day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.